And it doesn't. And you know what? We don't have to do like introductions or anything. Like we could just. It could be just the two of us just talking about it.
Okay.
So
The only introduction I can think of is, I finally made it. Now, let's get my opinions on before another wasp attacks. Something along those lines. That's the only thing I could think of. It's like, wait, I'm here. I'm alive. I gotta cash in on this. Just give me a minute. I'll do it as a speed route.
No, it could just be us just talking about Zelda as always.
Yeah, really. That would probably be like the most professional way you could get it done without it sounding too forced.
Yeah, just actually transitioning into the Great Bay Temple, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Alright, I got the timer started. Alright, so what do you think you liked the best about the Great Bay Temple?
What did I like the best about the Great Bay Temple?
All of us just like put it around like ranks 33 to 35 as there.
I guess the best compliment I can give was it made the Water Temple from Ocarina of Time seem a lot better. I'm sorry, I did not like the Great Bay Temple that much. I think, okay, the only thing I truly did like was the implementation of the ice arrow. And how, unlike in Ocarina of Time, you could actually create platforms on the water and use that to solve unique puzzles. So the ice arrow was implemented very well in the Great Bay Temple. What I didn't like was how, I know a lot of people absolutely love the controls of the Zora swimming and stuff, but in the Great Bay Temple, they come back to bite you in the ass. They're terrible.
I had a horrible time with the ice arrows. Like, I think that was like one of the biggest things that I had a lot of problems with, and just being finicky with the temple.
Yeah.
Is that, like, I kept on, like, the problem is that I kept on aiming at the water and things, and I swear I had the worst timing ever, and just, like, I either made it too far or too close or something, so, like, the Link would, like, slip into the water, especially if I'm, like, making it platform to platform.
Mm-hmm.
And there was even this one point where I was, like, trying to get, like, one straight berry or something. You had to, like, make a whole row of them in order to, like, hookshot into the ceiling, and that one bit me into the butt like no tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I had like no choice because I had to 100% the game.
Well, my problem was just like all the corridors, and the Zora suit was not swimming through them. It really wasn't. I was bumping into walls like, come on, move.
Please work. Please work.
And the camera, ugh.
It's horrible.
It's not horrible, but there it really rears its ugly head. Like, the Great Bay Temple and the camera in the 3D Zelda games do not match. They do not match at all.
No, they don't. Just for me, like, personally, I just hated the Zora outfit, just in general. Like, the Deku one, I felt like I had more control with, and the Goron one, it was kind of fun, but it had its little finicky moments.
The Zora suit was nice to use on the overworld, not so much in dungeons, though it was at least tolerable in the Stone Tower Temple. It was tolerable. I could put up with it. But in the Great Bay Temple, I was like, oh my god, please stop. Give me the boss key, please. I'm done with it. But I did like the music. It was pretty cool. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. It was very foreboding and intense. Like, you always felt like something was, like, about to jump out of the water at you. It was very doodle-doo, 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 doodle-doo. Whereas the Water Temple was very relaxing, calming. It was like, ooh, wow, I'm just going to float here and make myself a sitting duck. The Great Bay Temple made you aware that, oh god, something is in here and it's going to eat me.
Yeah, it had a very menacing atmosphere about it.
The atmosphere, the sea turtles, mate. The sea turtles. I'd like to pull a quote from Pirates of the Caribbean there. The implementation of taking a giant sea turtle to sail to get to the entrance. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was. He like steered you inside. He like reminded me of that island turtle from like the last Airbender. I remember. I don't know if you've seen that or not. It's like the second to last episode.
Loosely. I've seen the last Airbender loosely.
Yeah, it's like some kind of island turtle or something. It like takes them over to where the final battle is, and I'm like, okay, this isn't like a Majora's Mask ripoff or anything.
But no, it was pretty cool. I was like, oh, this is a cool way to introduce ourselves into the dungeon. And again, it had good starting signs. The music was foreboding, and I was like, ooh, I can get behind this. But once I donned the Zora suit and I started going through corridors, I'm like, please stop.
I remember when I remember I can give this compliment, is that, well, with the Ancient Cistern, it just felt a little bit too peaceful for my taste. And with the Great Bay Temple, it just kind of, this is just like me just kind of being a little nitpicky, is that I always like dungeons that just have serious tones behind them. And Great Bay Temple, it definitely has a serious tones about it.
Yeah, almost like a steampunk / water level in a way. Because there's all the pipe works and all that stuff. It sounds like an abandoned, I don't want to say sewage plant. I guess we'll just go for a typical answer and say water plant. Like an abandoned submerged factory. Ooh, that's a good one. Like
almost one that's never been found.
Water mill or something.
Almost like reminds me of that power plant nobody talks about in that. What is it? The first generation of Pokemon? You just don't see anybody there.
Yeah. But yeah, cool environment, cool music. I didn't have a real beef with the enemies. It was just the layout and the controls and the camera, all of it blend together just made it a very frustrating and unenjoyable temple.
That's true. And it's interesting though too, is that opinions can like go on opposite sides of the spectrum just at any time. Like for example, with the inside the Great Deku Tree, the inside the Great Deku Tree, Jitten. He's one of the 4 guys that's with us on the video. He actually ranked this as his worst dungeon ever.
Really? Wow.
I'm guessing it's because of Navi, just like probably trickling up his spine or something and saying, "Hey, listen, please listen to me." That's what I'm guessing.
I think I've grown immune to Navi because she just doesn't bother me anymore.
Yeah, like compared to Fee.
Yeah.
Like I remember like trying Fee or something like during my Skyward Sword adventures. It's like, can you just please shut up, please? And it's just like with Navi or something, she just kind of does it like one time just to explain things. But other than that, I mean, it's understandable. I mean, for newcomer like Zelda players,
really only bad when you replay it. The first time I played it, she never bothered me. I was just like, oh wow. For some reason, I wouldn't have thought of that. And then when I play it again, I'm like, yes, I get it. I really do. I get it. Like, I didn't know what her changing colors meant. So I'm glad she explained it. I really did. Because for the longest time, I didn't know that there was, like, some secret to, like, play the Song of Storms or the Scarecrow song. I didn't know. I didn't have the internet or a player's guide. I had no idea what the hell she was doing. I'm like, she's green. Why is she green? She's yellow. She's normally blue. Why is she green?
So that's the biggest shock factor about it?
That was one of them. When it comes to Navi. But if you want me to talk about the Great Deku Tree as a whole, I have mostly positives to say about the Great Deku Tree. Now, whether you consider this a nostalgic reason or not, that's up to you. That's in the eye of the beholder. But I felt that up to that point, all the other Zelda dungeons felt like just mazes or different colored dungeons. They didn't feel like environments. When I first stepped into the Great Deku Tree, I felt like I was part of an environment, like I could visit this place. And it was carved out in the way it was a dungeon implemented into an actual location, an actual area.
Yeah, something that's just more natural in the environment.
Yeah, and that is where the 3D Zeldas excel tremendously. You go into these places, and like 90% of them feel like, oh my god, these could be actual places. These could be like abandoned booby traps, like almost out of something out of Indiana Jones. Like abandoned, like they're called temples, abandoned temples that are now infested with monsters. And I can see that now.
Just kind of like ruins.
Yep. And the Great Deku Tree was the one that really kick-started that whole trend. Like, from that point on, I said, oh my god, this is great. I actually feel like this is an environment. Even though, yes, you look back, you see the age and the technology. That's not the point. The point is, you get the idea that this is more than just a different colored tile. I don't care what the hell, how much you like the original Zelda. All the dungeons were the same basic layout, just different colored.
Definitely, pretty much.
They all looked alike. They were just different colored. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing, like bad Zelda 1. You should do better. No, that's fine. Just the 3D Zeldas really knew how to implement that into actual environments and atmosphere. And I think the Great Deku Tree was very inviting in that way. And like one of the coolest things ever is how it's not a dungeon that you just go from start to finish in a linear pattern, but you spiral upwards and downwards, really letting the player understand 3D space.
Yeah, definitely.
And saying, I don't just have to explore this whole area. I can explore up, I can go down. Dungeons now have multiple layers in 3-dimensional space.
It's kind of funny. It kind of like goes against like Egoraptor's, what was it? Like comparing a Link to the Past to the Ocarina of Time a little bit.
Yeah.
He's like saying, oh, there needs to be like a top-down view or something, but the Great Deku Tree just it kind of gives off the feeling, well, this is the best way that you can use 3D to translate it into a Zelda game. This is it right here. I mean, you jump down into the spider web. It's like,
yes,
you can't get any more ways to introduce the first dungeon than in that way. It's just like, oh my gosh, I'm jumping 2 floors up here, and I'm going to jump right into a spider web. And
that can be greatly emphasized when you look at 2D remakes of Ocarina of Time. And, like, every 2D remake before the damn thing is taken down by Nintendo, the dungeon you see is the Great Deku Tree. And it loses something by not having that 3-dimensional space and actually knowing that this is in layers. I have a top layer, I have a middle layer, and I have a bottom layer. I'm really exploring this tree. You don't get that in 2D. You can't. So the Great Deku Tree, like, really is like a great way to introduce someone to a 3-dimensional environment and to be the first dungeon. It's not really challenging because it's trying to get you to adjust to this dramatic change in space, especially at the time, and even now, if you were like to take someone who never played a video game before, and all they played was like a couple minutes out of A Link to the Past, and then you just throw them right to Ocarina of Time, and they're like, oh my god, I'm controlling this character in 3-dimensional space. Like, let's just assume that they never played another 3-dimensional game, and this is their first one. Even today, the Great Deku Tree introduces it tremendously well.
Yeah, definitely.
And for bonus points, the slingshot does its job, and it works. And you don't have to shoot at anything too specific yet, so you kind of don't... It kind of doesn't hit you that the controls of first person are a little stiff. It doesn't really hit you yet. It hits you in the Forest Temple, because you realize, I'm using the bow, but this technology is not yet recommending accuracy.
That's a great
when it comes to the slingshot, and you're just firing at simple targets, you think, this works. This works. Everything I aim at, I can hit. I don't want to say bad, but I want to say maybe not even unpolished, but
it's just simply a beginner's dungeon. Is that it does its job right? It gives you tutorials. It gives you a slingshot. It gives you a simple weapon to work with.
Now, keep in mind, it's not my favorite first dungeon, but it does do the job of a first dungeon well. It introduces new things that you really wouldn't think about when it comes to 3-dimensional space. It's paced fairly quick, but at the same time, it doesn't go too quick to where you don't remember it. It leaves an impression. And third and most important, it's somewhat peaceable, especially when you listen to the music.
And it's kind of haunting for me.
Yeah.
For me, it just kind of feels like a first step into a foreboding atmosphere. Like, outside of your comfort zone from the Kokiri Forest, it's like, holy cow, there's something going on in here. And it kind of suits the trees, though, environment a little bit, too. I mean, with the music, it sounds a little bit hollow. It sounds a little bit...
Yeah.
It just sounds like that you're actually in there, like that you're actually inside of a tree.
Like, to me, I think it's genius. Like, how... Like, you think about it, and it's like, this is the first dungeon you're going into. And then you think about it, and it's like, oh my god, what other dungeon would be more perfect than a first dungeon than this? For new 3-dimensional technology that nobody's familiar with. Like, what a perfect way to ease them in to the dungeons coming up where it's more tricky and you've already established 3D space. Now I can really throw the more interesting things at you.
Okay, next dungeon is going to be inside the Lord Jabu-Jabu's belly, and this is your worst dungeon of all time.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so... is
it... 80% of it does go through because of Ruto, Princess Ruto. I'm not the biggest fan of escort missions. I'm not the biggest fan of, oh, son of a bitch, she didn't come in with me. Where is she? Where'd she go? Damn it, damn it, damn it, you just stunted my progress.
Just where is that blue thing?
That's where most of it goes, and just, it's cool that the environment is the belly of a whale. Like, it is kind of unique. Like, you're like, this isn't a traditional water dungeon. This is kind of like its own thing. It's an environment, it's the belly of a whale. But at the same time, there's not much you can do with the belly of a whale. This is also evident in Monstro from Kingdom Hearts. It's a cool concept, don't get me wrong, but to have a whole dungeon from that, after a while you're like, wrap it up. And funnily enough, the only reason it's not that much higher is because I believe one of the rules was you can't count bosses, correct?
Yeah, you can't count bosses.
Yeah, you can't count bosses. And Baronade, or Baronade, however you want to pronounce them, Baronade, Lemonade.
That's the funny thing about the Zelda universe, is that nobody ever vocally says what is what.
Nobody does, exactly. That's
it's like, who's
B,
who's Spy, who's Nabu, who's Navy.
Yeah.
So
the only thing we know is Link and Zelda.
And yeah, that's true. I mean, they're like one-syllable names. They're not hard to pronounce.
And Ganondorf, and that's only because of Smash Brothers. Ganondorf! That's it.
Yeah, I wonder if we'd be able to pronounce Luigi's name right if we didn't hear that name. Luigi, I don't know.
Who knows? I mean, there was eventually Luigi's Mansion. Mario! Luigi!
Mario.
But back to the topic at hand, I was very impressed with Baronade as a boss. Like, I kind of liked him. Like, not design-wise, but just, like, structure and battle tactic and how, oh, this is something that keeps you on your toes now. It doesn't necessarily just get stunned once you hit it with one item. Like, I remember the first time I fought it, I was like, okay, I hit it with the boomerang and it gets stunned. And I hit it with the boomerang and it still shocked me. I said, oh, damn, I gotta put up more of an effort.
And I remember, okay, you gotta throw the boomerang past the jellyfish, too.
Yeah, and it uses the jellyfish as a shield, and it's a very, like, you could easily see why it's the best boss of the childhood arc in Ocarina of Time. And I won't lie, it can kick your ass if you're not prepared for it. Like, I'm a Zelda veteran now, so it's kind of like, yeah, I got you down pat. But if you didn't know what this thing is capable of, it can easily kick your ass.
Oh, you're talking about like the worms that go into the holes and like block you off, and they like keep you from getting to the rest of the dungeon. Or, you know, you got to throw like the boomerangs like up at the top where the tip of their tails are.
Those things, yes, that gets a little tedious for me, because it's like, I think 3 of the same enemy, and it's just like, here we go again, here we go again. That's another thing that kind of bothered me inside Jabu-Jabu's belly. The lack of actual puzzles. Like, it's mostly just escorting and disabling barriers.
Or putting the fish down on a little switch as
Yep.
What was it? I forgot what it was called. It's not a doorstop. I can't think of the word that you use as... I don't know. I forgot. You're using it as weight for the switch. It's just like,
using it as like dead weight for the switch. Yeah.
You like going to the door, then come back out, and then she's like escorting to you. And it's like, hey, what are you doing?
Yep.
Don't go anywhere without me. I'm the princess. Pay attention to me. And like, for me personally, I never really minded Ruto.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just think since I played the game quite a bit, or I don't know, I didn't feel like that she really got in your way, or she didn't really have a health bar or anything that you had to worry about.
She didn't, but it was very aggravating. Like, it took me the longest time to understand how to keep her. Wait here, sit on this switch. Please don't disappear when I come back. And there was something I do for the longest time that I don't think I put her exactly in the right spot, and the game didn't register. So where I'd leave, she wasn't standing there. So I'm like, oh, damn, where'd she go?
Yeah, she's just kind of random. I think I talked to you once before. I think you hated the mini-boss, right?
Oh yeah, the mini-boss is atrocious.
It's just like you kind of have to walk like very sharply towards the interior of the platform, and then you could get hit by the spikes, and
yep.
And then throwing the boomerang is kind of finicky to actually hit the guy. You actually have to throw it through the platform or something to actually try and hit the guy, and then you're just like, you know.
It's finicky, it's long, like the battle just drags, and you're like, come on.
It's like, are we done with this merry-go-round trip yet?
And it really doesn't do anything but charge towards you and go in different directions. It doesn't have that many attacks. But on the other hand, it's like, thank God it doesn't.
It's just
The
like all I
battle's
can
frustrating
do is
enough.
all I can do is just wheel around.
But yeah, the sole reason it's not higher is because I can't count in the fact that Baronade is an actual good boss. I have to look at the dungeon aside from Baronade, and for me, it's very lackluster.
Well, there's nothing wrong. Everybody has anchor somewhere.
That's my anchor. Lodged in the belly of a giant fish.
We have rank number 32 next, which is the Dragon Roost Cavern. This is actually an interesting one because the three of us, me, Joe, and you, we actually ranked it pretty stinking low. And Jitten, he actually ranked it up about as high as I did with Lord Jabu-Jabu's belly did, actually. He actually put it at the number 16 spot. So the rest of us thought, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, for me personally, with the Dragon Roost Cavern, it was kind of a fun concept, like with the, with the hook and everything, you can kind of throw it up into the sky, but the thing for me is that it just kind of felt like it kind of dragged that out a little bit, or it just felt like I was just kind of taking long walks down hallways or something, or like backtracking to get back to this certain thing, and then it just kind of felt like past the surprise factor of the hook a little bit, or I guess saving Medley in that outdoor section was pretty cool too, but it just felt like otherwise, it just wasn't really one that kind of clicked with me.
One of the more minor factors of why Dragon Roost Cavern was kind of with me was, unlike games like Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, and even Skyward Sword, when you finally get to the first dungeon, you're like, whew, it took a while to finally get to you, but you're a pretty cool dungeon and very memorable. Even counting Dragon Roost Cavern, I was like, and the game's still not getting that interesting. It was actually the second dungeon where I was like, there it is. There's the Zelda I know and love.
Oh, Forbidden Woods?
Yeah. When it came to Dragon Roost Cavern, I was like, well, this is our dungeon, because it certainly wasn't the Forsaken Fortress, but this is our dungeon. I expected a little better.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, is that it kind of feels more like an overworld type of thing rather than a dungeon. I just felt like you just kind of walk into it, it's like, well, it just feels like another location that I've been walking into anywhere else around here.
It seems like Diet Dodongo's Cavern is a good way to put it.
Is there a lot of nasty...
Dodongo's Cavern Light.
There are a lot of nasty chemicals in there we have to worry about? You know about
it's
the joke.
More of... Yeah, I got you. But to explain it more, I felt like Dodongo's Cavern just had more to it. More enemies, more obstacles.
Can you actually, like, drop the bombs onto the sides?
More things you could do. Whereas Dragon Roost Cavern, yeah, it's kind of the same thing in the fire dungeon, and the grappling hook is implemented quite well, I'll give it that. But there were quite a few empty rooms, there were quite a few wasted potential, and just the area, the entire dungeon as a whole, I'm like, I've done this before. And it's not offering me anything too much new.
Oh, it's true. I mean, both of us have played Ocarina of Time before we played Wind Waker, and so we're going to be making those comparisons. And so when we go into Dodongo's Cavern, it's like, well, this is actually a legitimate place. You got like the Lizalfos, and you got the bombs right here, and you can use this puzzle right here, and it's a nice introduction. And it actually uses quite a few things that haven't been seen in the Deku Tree, and then when it introduces Dragon Roost Cavern, it's like, okay, I throw the stick at the little thing, and it catches on fire. It's like, well, I think you could have done a little bit better than that, right?
And it reuses that tactic quite a bit.
That's true.
Hey, sticks like torches. I know. I played Ocarina of Time.
Deku sticks, the most phenomenal weapon in Zelda ever. Not.
And
you know what's funny is that actually brings up the Spirit Temple a little bit, is that a lot of people like praise it for like being a kid and it's interesting and things, and I kind of like the gimmick of like it has its own charm of like being a kid inside of the Spirit Temple. You kind of have something to reflect back onto. But I honestly felt the puzzles in that dungeon with the Spirit Temple on the kid side, it just kind of felt a little bit outdated to just use Deku sticks and things again. Like just from my side.
Yeah, I could see that.
It's just like you've gotten like the long shot, you've gotten like the hero's bow and the Megaton hammer and the hover boots and all these cool items. And
but you can't use those as a kid.
Yeah, and you just kind of regress back to like items you've been using in like the first dungeon or two. So that's kind of what Dragon Roost Cavern kind of felt like to me, is that It had a great way to. It had a great environmental feel. It's actually my favorite music from a Zelda dungeon, like from Wind Waker.
Really?
Yeah, I actually like the Dragon Roost Cavern. It's very subtle. It's very nice.
See, again, it just feels like very similar to Dodongo's Cavern, but in that aspect, I prefer Dodongo's Cavern, even as subtle as it is. Like, they both have that kind of steam hissing sound. The
Yeah, it's true.
So it just kind of blended in for me. And I guess to sum it up, why I didn't think too highly of Dragon Roost Cavern was, especially, like I said, with other Zelda games, I felt like I finally got that payoff. For me, even with Wind Waker, Dragon Roost Cavern was not that payoff. It still left me wanting more. I'm like, that's it?
It's like, you give me this little hook and that's it?
That's all you give me? And keep in mind, Wind Waker has a long-ass opening, and it gets better the more you play it, but the first time it's like, it should be a sin that I'm taking this long to go to the first dungeon. No, it's tradition now.
So it's
It's
like you go to Outside Island, and then you head to Forsaken Fortress, and then you gotta find the thing for the sale, and then you finally get over to Dragon Roost Island, and it's like, come on!
Yeah.
Bring me something.
It really is. Like Ocarina of Time and A Link to the Past, within the first 10 to 20 minutes, you're in that first dungeon.
Yeah.
Majora's Mask and onwards, it takes a couple hours, and it's like, son of a bitch, who thought this was a good idea? And like I said, it's tradition now. It's like, oh, it's expected for these games to have these big, bloated openings that lead into the first dungeon. I'm like, why? Here's an idea. Zelda for Wii U, can't you just start with the dungeon? The first dungeon. Like, the game starts, you select the name, boom, you're in the first dungeon. And then, after the first dungeon, then you can go into the story.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, there's
Like,
so many
how's
video
that
games.
for a hook?
Well, so many video
Instead of just
games.
saying, this is another legend that you've never heard of before until now because we've just heard of it. No. I've heard that spiel before. Just drop me into the dungeon and be like, oh shit. I hit the ground running. I hit the start button. I named my character and I'm in and I am at the entrance. And I'm like, damn. And then as soon as I finish the dungeon, then we can get to the story and how he came to that point and yada yada yada, what his goal is, what the quest is, stuff like that.
And video games
I think
work.
that would be very unique and a nice, refreshing little dab on the Zelda franchise. Just saying.
But instead, it just kind of like drops you rolling for like 2 hours. It's like, and it just feels like Dragon Roost Cavern. It doesn't really hold up to the introduction that it was meant to be.
Nope, it doesn't.
Alright, the next one is going to be inside Ganon's Tower from Wind Waker. The one where you gotta fight those bosses. That's kind of like a boss rush mode.
Yeah, I'll make this quick.
You know, just like Mega Man style. It's just like, you fought all these guys before. Let's just rub this.
Wily's Fortress Zelda Edition.
For me, Ganon's Tower, for me personally, I just hate it because of one reason, is that the bosses give off a really strong staticky noise, and I don't know why, and I don't know how it came to be, but that staticky noise just kind of drives me up the wall. It sounds like something that The Ring and that the Freddy vs. Jason movie or something and had a baby of and just started crying. I don't know. Bad analogy, but...
Interesting analogy. I wouldn't say it's bad. Very interesting. Gets you thinking. But for me, when it comes to Inside Ganon's Tower, I think it's like, you're better than this, Nintendo. You've just gone through Basic Final Level 101. As brought to you by Capcom, the Dr. Wily way. Like, you take, like, this generic tower. Hey, remember those things you hated from those other dungeons? They're back. Remember those things you loved from previous dungeons? They're back. Hey, remember all the items you've collected? They're implemented, but in the same way, nothing different, nothing unique, like in Ganon's Tower and Ocarina of Time. Like, those are like, oh, I've never used these items before, you sick bitch. But when it comes to Ganon's Tower and Wind Waker, it's just like, yeah, it's the same thing, same old, same old. Hey, the bosses, they're back. And it's just a shame because Wind Waker has such a fantastic finale. Like, the final boss, I love it. The ending, I love it. But that level is just, damn, we spent too much time on the stupid Triforce chart. We need to make the final level. Just shove everything in and get this thing out on sale. Sounds good to me.
Let's just pack. Hey, I've actually heard, though, with Wind Wakers that they scrapped like 2 dungeons before they were... or like done with the game or something.
Yeah, and they were put into Twilight Princess.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting with Wind Waker. I wonder how much more lasting value it would have been if it had a couple of dungeons or something. It actually makes me wonder if inside Ganon's tower they just decided, hey, let's just make this like a quick expedition run of...
Oh, you can tell. You can tell. Like, hey, remember Phantom Ganon? Let's stretch him out to where you have to do this real annoying maze and fight him up to like 7 times before you can actually kill the damn thing.
And it also makes you wonder during those 7 times though too if you've been doing it right or wrong.
Nintendo, you're padding. You've done better final levels before. Ocarina of Time, Super Mario Sunshine, Paper Mario, Super Mario World. And I mean, Super Mario World even had the, hey, there's various rooms based on levels that you've done before, but in unique and different ways, and extremely challenging. Like, you actually have to pick, hey, pick my poison. Which 2 levels are the least brutal before I get to Bowser?
Yeah, I think it's like doors 1 to 4 and then doors 5 to 8, right?
Yes, exactly. And you can only pick 2 of them, and you better pick wisely, because you'd be like, well, I lost my spare shroom. Damn, now I'm going after Bowser as Mini Mario. Hope I don't do something stupid.
Yeah, it's kind of weird though too with inside Ganon's tower though too, is that it's just a straight corridor through.
Yep.
You just like, you take a Deku leaf or something and just start soaring or something, it's like, oh. And then with the Earth Temple segment, it's just like, okay, just roll yourself like past all of these falling doors.
Yeah.
Or just like, I don't know, it's kind of funny, like with the facing Phantom Ganon like so many times, it just made me hate the one from Ocarina of Time a lot more, just simply because it reminds me of that thing from Wind Waker. I remember as a kid I was going through Wind Waker.
This is the Phantom Ganon from Ocarina of Time. Made me say, oh, where's he at? Yeah. Come back, old friend. You knew how to do it right.
That's so true, but I remember going through that just as a kid or something. I remember the thing that goofed me up the most, kind of going through that dungeon the first time, is that I didn't know with the sword, it kind of like drops on its hilt or something towards the door you're supposed to go towards. After doing that like the first or second time or something, I was like, oh, maybe I'm not doing this right. And then I chose a different direction, and then I came across a strategy guide like later that you're supposed to follow the hilt of the sword or something like 7 times. It's like, really?
Yeah.
It's just like, who does that kind of repetition in a Zelda game? Seriously.
Like, I know rinse and repeat is kind of like common in Zelda things, but don't take it that literally, please.
It's just like, well, it's kind of like with washing your hands and things, just like what you were saying with rinsing your hands. It's just like, it's fine if you do it once, but kind of doing it past that, it kind of makes you like a germaphobe or something. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know, bad analogy, but...
Yeah, I get it, but it's funny because I look at this and I think a lot of people like to take these complaints and slap them on Hyrule Castle and Twilight Princess. So I'm like, no. This Twilight Princess is actually fairly different. It does its own thing, and I'll get to that later. But for the most part, I really liked the final dungeon in Twilight Princess because I think it corrected a lot of things that Ganon's Tower did, where I felt it was just, let's just slap some things together.
And you know what's funny though too is that it brings up the Ganon's Tower from Ocarina of Time though too, is that you know when comparing that game, I actually gave that dungeon a number 8 on my spot. And the reason I love Ganon's Tower from Ocarina of Time a lot more is that it introduces a lot of original ideas.
Yes, it does.
And it mixes in a lot of different items, a lot of different strategies, and it keeps you on your toes. It doesn't treat you like a baby and saying, hey, you've done this before. It actually adds on new puzzles where if you're not careful, it'll actually smack the crap out of you.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I really like it. You go through, let's say, the fire door. You're like, okay, so I'm just doing what the hell is this? Oh my god, no. Not the silver rupees. No!
Yeah, it actually works with creating a lot of original concepts that you haven't seen. Well, you've kind of seen throughout the game or something, but it twists it. It ramps up the difficulty so high that it keeps you on your toes all the time.
Use items you're familiar with in an unfamiliar way and say, hey, you got to think outside the box now. You've used this how many times now? What way have you not used it yet? You're like, let me try. Oh, that's quite clever.
Yeah, and then it feels like when we're coming back to the Ganon's Tower with Wind Waker, I remember playing this after Ocarina of Time, it's just like, really, this is the best you can do? It's just like, just do a little Mega Man, I don't know, just a little Mega Man run? I don't think anybody, I don't know. I guess I shouldn't really compare it to Mega Man, but...
And it's a shame because you're like, oh, what is this? And then you go through the door and you face Puppet Ganon, and that stuff's fantastic, it's incredible. Like, I never in 1,000 years thought, like, one of the final battles would be a puppet form of Ganon that's shapeshifts and stuff like that. Like, that's very unique and something that I didn't predict. I didn't see coming. So I was like, very original and cool. I like it. And the final battle was really cool as well. But the dungeon itself is just, I'm sorry. I could tell that it was rushed.
Alright, so for me, like with the Woodfall Temple, is that the only thing that kind of stands out for me, like from the dungeon like that, is just its poisonous atmosphere. I like the color of the poisonous, and I like the kind of music behind it. That was the best part for me, just that
instrument.
It sounds like monkeys, just like doing that tribe shout, you know?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, that was actually one of the more standout tracks from Woodfall Temple for me, actually, or from Majora's Mask.
Yeah.
I just like that distinct style of the music. It was so cool. But it feels like though on any other side though, it kind of I know that I understand it being a first dungeon, and well,
yeah,
I'd probably say I actually rank this just I think one more place just above my inside Great Deku Trees. I feel like it's a great introduction dungeon. It's pretty easy, it's pretty straightforward, it doesn't have any hard puzzles, and I enjoyed myself, but I wouldn't like, because it was a beginner dungeon, I didn't like soar it up through my ranks or anything. Like everything was enjoyable about it. I think the thing that I actually like the most about it is that frog, he like jumps on the turtle and like tries to go after you.
That mini boss.
Yeah, and then you like dive into the ground as a Deku scrub, and then you pop up and wah! You know what part I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, that was actually the most satisfying.
That's actually one of the things I like most about Majora's Mask as a whole. And I know it's very rare for me to sing Majora's Mask that many praises, but definitely multiple mini bosses, like, it really caught me off guard. I remember the first time playing, I'm like, oh, here we go, the mini boss, the Dynafalls. I remember this guy, and then I remember getting to the boss key, and instead of like a little obstacle, it was that frog guy. I'm like, whoa, another mini boss? Oh shit!
Yeah, that's right. I think
it definitely threw a monkey wrench into the standard dungeon formula, to where I was like, okay, mini boss got the item, puzzle, boss key, boss, I got it. Okay, mini boss got the item, right. But now for the boss. Whoa! Another mini boss. Yikes!
Where did this come from?
And the Deku scrub Link, he was implemented well. He was pretty cool. And I do agree with you on the poison aspects, and the music was cool. And unlike how I described Dragon Roost Cavern, and I'm gonna get shot for this, but after the abysmal slog that was the first couple hours of Majora's Mask, when I finally got this dungeon, I was like, okay, this is the Zelda I'm familiar with. I'm back at home. It's Zelda. There's the dungeon I've been wanting. Took you long enough, because this was the first the Zelda game to ever do this to me. I'm like, where the hell is this dungeon? I've had to repeat the first 3 days twice. Once as a scrub, and another as a human. Come on already. Give me the damn dungeon. And when I finally got it, I'm like, oh, good things come to those who wait. Because it was an enjoyable dungeon, it was challenging, and it was kind of upsetting the first time because I wanted to soak it in, but I had a time limit, and I just wanted to be like, oh, piss off. Let me enjoy this, you son of a bitch.
It's just like, let me just take everything in. That's actually my major gripe with all of the dungeons in Majora's Mask. Is that,
oh yeah, you can't soak them in.
It's just like, the time limit is great for being outside of the dungeons, but not inside them. Just stop the timer. Just, you know what, there's nothing relevant about the time in the dungeons. It doesn't contribute to any side quests or anything.
No.
Just let me enjoy my dungeon.
Exactly, like, knock it off, go away, I don't care. I don't feel pressured, I feel kind of like you're poking me in the butt, like, it's like if you're going through, I think the best example I can give is Noah's Ark from Kennywood. If you've ever been on that ride.
No, I haven't.
It's one of those rides that you walk through almost like a tour, and you see different sights. Now, Majora's Mask is going through Noah's Ark with someone constantly poking you in the back, to where you can't stop and appreciate the sights, you just got to get to the end. And someone's like, come on, get moving, more people got to go. Come on, get moving, more people want to see it. Come on, get moving. And you can't really stop and appreciate the ride as a whole because someone's constantly poking you in the back.
It's just like, move along there, buddy. Move along. It actually feels more like a slave lineup, actually. It's just
And like with the Woodfall Temple, I was kind of like, oh, you're such a jerk. Let me just soak this in. With the Snowhead Temple, I was like, this is a little tedious anyways. Thanks for the kick. With Great Bay Temple, I'm like, stop it, you son of a bitch. I'm trying to concentrate. With Stone Tower Temple, it's more like, this one too?
And especially since I had to 100% Majora's Mask though too, with the oh, we'll talk about the Stone Tower Temple later, but
yeah,
100%ing this game, it's a very tedious chore with the street fairies, anyways.
Yeah,
especially the last two. The first two were kind of okay. I mean, once you knew where they were, anyways.
I don't think I've ever gotten all the stray fairies. I could be wrong. If you're saying tedious, I'm pretty sure if I had to 100% and get all the stray fairies, my opinions of Majora's Mask would be from, it's a pretty decent game, to this piece of shit.
Yeah, that's about... Oh, I'd probably say that my line is more on the latter part that you just proposed at the moment. Because, like, I got the strategy guide and everything, and I knew where all of the stray fairies were, told me where they were to guide it, but I was like, if I didn't have a strategy guide, that's where the big problem would be. And that's kind of been my big thing about Majora's Mask, is that it's just like, you can't really thoroughly enjoy this game with the side quests and everything until you have a strategy guide to know where everything is.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, let me give you this side quest right here. It's like, what am I supposed to do with this side quest? Can you please tell me where the side quest is? Nope. Figure it out yourself. So run along there, buddy. While I poke you in the back with this little stick here.
And taking it back to the Woodfall Temple, as a whole, it is a very enjoyable dungeon, and it is great payoff to what I thought would take forever to finally get to that final dungeon. But it really made me appreciate it a lot more. Despite feeling that I was being rushed through it and poked in the back, it really made me appreciate it more that I got to wait for it, that I wasn't just handed it. So it's kind of a counterpoint to earlier when I said I'd like to play a Zelda game where I'm just thrown right into the Zelda dungeon. But as it's proven with Majora's Mask and we'll talk about later Twilight Princess, the longer you wait, when you have a really good first dungeon, it really like hits home. Like when you finally get that dungeon you've been waiting for and pining over, it's like, oh, you waited for them to carefully cook this steak. They didn't just throw it on your plate. You waited, and you're tasting the sensation, and it's so good and rewarding.
Yeah, and it's original to boot, though, too. It kind of adds on to the salt and pepper to the steak, though, too.
Yep, it is.
It's just like with Dragon Root's Cavern. It's more like an example of, okay, let's just revamp this kind of stuff and put more like an overworld thing. Here it's kind of like inside the Great Deku Tree, is that it's a little bit more, let's see, isolated from the rest of the atmosphere, and it just kind of gives its own vibe to it.
Well, Dragon Root's Cavern is more like, here's my steak, but you forgot to season it, you pricks! At least give me some A1 sauce, you uncold-hearted bastard!
Give me my steak now. I've been cooking it this long. But don't overdo it, though. But don't burn it, though, just like with the... Just like with inside Ganon's Tower. Don't burn that steak. Just leave it cooked once.
It's like, oh, and I got some soda here. It's flat. Remember when it had a fizz when it was called Dodongo's Cavern? Remember that? Yeah, but no, Woodfall Temple, when I finally got to it, I really enjoyed it. I really don't have that much negatives towards it. I think the reason I just didn't put it that high was because all of the dungeons I really felt were better.
Yeah, and there's no more explanation needed than that.
Yeah.
I mean, that goes for anyone.
It didn't upset me, it didn't keep me sour, just as a whole, there were other dungeons that were better, but I still like it.
Alright, so the last dungeon that we're going to be going through, the Palace of Twilight. So to introduce this one, is that I'm the only one that ranked it really, really high. Did I rank it around like rank 7, 8, 9, something like that?
Wow.
I ranked it pretty stinking high, but the rest of you guys thought it was completely dismal. Actually, Joe, the one that we're collaborating with, he actually put this down as his worst dungeon ever.
I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, number 35. He slammed it. He hated it. He hates it pretty darn badly.
Give me a refresher. Where did I put it as?
I don't remember, but I do remember it is pretty low.
Pretty low? Alright.
Yeah, well, enough that it got down to the ranks of 29 and 30. That's where the rank of this is at.
Yeah.
Well, for me with Palace of Twilight, I guess I'll explain first. Is that I kind of like it feels like just kind of going through all of the dungeons in Twilight Princess. It's just like you got to find that origin source somewhere where all of this Twilight has been coming from. And
yeah.
For me personally, with the Palace of Twilight, it's just like, okay, here it is. Here's the dungeon. Here's the place where it's all actually been happening. It's been coming from this place, and the environment just kind of ties everything up with Twilight Princess. It's a very haunting atmosphere. It doesn't look very inviting.
No, it doesn't.
And I remember in the outdoor regions or something, like, it looks very blurry and foggish, and it kind of distorts the colors, like, really badly. I know that's a common complaint with Twilight Princess, and that's fine if anybody has that, but for me...
I always thought that was the point.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, though, that, like, with Joe's number 35 choices, that might be one of the reasons. For me,
I always thought, like, for Twilight Princess as a whole, when people are like, where are the colors? I'm like, isn't that the point? Isn't that kind of like what the Twilight's doing, sucking the joy and happiness out of everyone?
Yeah, pretty much like Dementors from Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Like, it's like they're not...
Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I took it. I thought the Twilight were literally like soul-sucking leeches.
Yeah, it's just like it's kind of taken away from the colorful, bright atmosphere that Zelda usually is. It's just giving a threat to the world like it has been with the other games.
Mm-hmm. And it's not in a surreal, freaky way like Majora's, but in like kind of a drab, somber way. Yeah, like a shadow cast over an entire land.
The best part I remember about Palace of Twilight that actually scared me the most, I think I was like a teenager or something when I played this game. Mm-hmm. Like my first time, I think it was around like 16 or 17 or so. Mm-hmm. I remember when the hand came alive or something, that freaked me the freak out. I remember just kind of like picking up the orb or something, and I was like walking away. It's just all innocent and things. I'm like, oh.
See, I saw it coming.
Yeah, I knew something was going to happen.
I'm gonna grab this orb. All right, what's going to get me? Ah, the hand. Ooh, you're persistent.
I knew something was going to come after me, but I remember when the hand just like came alive. It's just the thought of knowing that the hand was coming towards me that scared the crap out of me. I remember, and the puzzles though too in the dungeon. Too is that I remember like working with the ball. You have to like get it into that center switch to get the staircases up and things. And
yeah.
You have to get yourself in a few interesting positions to actually keep going forward with it. And then it's hard to concentrate with that thing just knowing it's coming. And for me, that's a really memorable moment from the game. It's just like, it just fits it. It fits the whole thing with the Palace of Twilight. It's not meant to be friendly, and there's this hand like coming after me. That was my highlight from the dungeon anyways.
I think the reason why I ranked it so low was the same reason I ranked Inside Lord Jabu-Jabu's belly so low. In the sense that when I had to take away the Zant fight, the rest of the dungeon kind of faded. Like its impression just kind of went poof. It was there. It wasn't that high. It didn't make me say, ooh, I remember that, I'll never forget that. I mean, the hand coming after me, I'm like, I've seen stuff like this before. It was kind of expected, like I said. As soon as I grabbed it, I'm like, let me guess, something's going to chase me. But I mean, when you have something as, like, jaw-dropping, something you don't expect, very interesting scenario with Zant, spoiler, whatever the hell you want to classify, maybe some of you know what I'm talking about, maybe some of you actually don't. When you have to take that out and analyze the dungeon itself, it's kind of like a huge gaping hole. Like you get a giant pizza, but when you finally order the pizza, nothing's on it.
It's just all cheese, huh?
Yeah, it's just all cheese.
I guess that's why
not even sauce. And you're like, there's no flavor here. There's something missing. And the fact is that it is the Zant boss battle that ties that all together. And when I had to look at the dungeon without the boss battle, it was kind of just empty space leading up to a really good boss battle.
Yeah, it was like... Yeah, I agree with you.
Like, I remember thinking back, like, I think that's the point, but you're there... Where the hell is everyone? This is the Palace of Twilight. It should be flooded with monsters. Where is everything?
Yeah, it's just a very desolate place.
Yeah, it is. Like, even the enemies are, like, very scarce.
I remember I don't know. It's a hard dungeon to talk about. Just within its placing though too. I mean, up to this point though too.
On the one hand, you want to be like, why is it so empty? Is it laziness? But on the other hand, you almost want to think it's intentional, like it's a reflection on Xan's own loneliness and like his desire to where he secretly wants to be a part of something greater, and he wants to like be the king of Twilight. But he's had this realization that he's not that important anymore. Even his god is just something that has been defeated before. His life is a lie. His whole existence is crashing down. So maybe it's a good... Oh my god, I think I fixed the Palace of Twilight for me. It has a deeper meaning.
You know what's funny?
Twilight is like this symbolism, this reflection on Xan's own loneliness.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. The enemies are floating heads of Xant and Phantom Xant. They're ghosts. They're fragments of what Xant thinks he is. They're an illusion. That's why Xant's such a perfect, fantastic, well-written character. He's a disillusioned nutcase. He sees himself as this end-all of be-all of things, and when it all comes crashing down, it's a brilliant moment. And when everyone's like, oh, for some reason he's just a spaz, I'm like, you're a fool, you didn't get it. You didn't read the signs. That's the whole point. There should have been no, like, I always hear people say, there should have been more hints towards Xant's madness. And I argue against that because I'm like, that would totally spoil the surprise. Because just having him finally just snap like that kind of stuff doesn't just... you don't gradually descend into madness. When that happens and everything you bet on just crashes before you, you lose it there. Right then and there. Like, it's all gone. And that's why Xant is like one of my favorite villains of all time. Bam, just sit there. Bam.
Yeah, it just kind of built up to it. You know what's funny with the Palace of Twilight and Hyrule Castles? I think they're both kind of the same in a few certain ways. Is that with the Palace of Twilight, you got like the Twilight Realm version of it, which you've been doing throughout the game, and then you got the Hyrule Castle version, which is
the Light World, yeah.
Yeah, the Light World. It's kind of funny how they kind of place these just like one after the other. Like for me,
and they kind of fix each other in a way.
Yeah.
Like everything the one is lacking, the other one has.
You know what's funny about both of them is that neither of them don't really have a whole lot of puzzles behind them. They don't have a lot of enemies behind them.
Correct.
It's more like just kind of taking in just everything of what's been happening with the world while you've been kind of in these dungeons, and then you kind of go to these worlds, into these dungeons or something. And
they're a yin and yang dungeon, really.
Yeah.
Like one could technically be the dark dungeon, and the other could be the light dungeon, if you really want to think about it that way.
But
actually, that's a really cool way to think about it.
But the interesting thing, though, too, like for me, this is kind of like taking
my rating of Palace of Twilight up a couple notches.
Oh, I'm actually looking at your ranking right now. It's actually number 24.
Bump it up. I'm just kidding, of course, but it does make me think twice about it, like from that aspect. Again, I'm totally blowing smoke out my ass. This could not be the intention at all. This is just thinking back on it and being like, what if that was the intention? Because that would be really cool.
Well, you know, like for me, like personally though, like when you've been through like both of these dungeons, this is the kind of thing that kind of strikes me, is that maybe both aren't the answer. Maybe yin and yang aren't the answer. Like you go through both of these worlds, like completely dark and then completely light. Like you've got Xant on one side who's like going on the dark side, and there's a Ganondorf like heading towards the normal Hyrule stuff. But yet their castles are completely desolate. Like they've both gone about their own evil schemes, their own different ways, but they're still really empty guys. It's like
because Xant is more like slowly descending into insanity, realizing everything is a lie, whereas Ganondorf himself is kind of ascending into this role of godhood. This is him coming back into the world with full force. He's right at the top saying, I'm back, come challenge me if you will. I'm here to rewrite history in blood, which is like one of his final lines in the final battle. The history of light and shadow will be written in blood.
Yeah, I remember that.
So like they're beautiful. Like they're such a beautiful dynamic because they're such
different.
Different characters that in a sense almost complement each other.
Yeah, you got... That was kind of interesting, though, too. I mean, Ganondorf you don't really see until the very end of the game, and Xant you've been seeing throughout the entire game.
Yeah.
Which is
like I said, Ganondorf's been behind the shadows, emerging into the light, hence the Hyrule Castle, and Zant has been in the forefront, crawling back into the shadows. Ooh. Let's fire MatPat and make our own game theory.
oh, like finding out the yin and yang of these two dungeons?
Zant and Ganon are yin and yang. They are the representation of yin and yang in Hyrule.
Yeah, like the good and the bad way to do villainy?
Yeah.
Actually, when you bring that up, I actually just thought of something, is that throughout the entire Twilight Princess adventure, like, Zant's been doing this scheme and things, you know, like the game's been hinting at saying things like, oh, this is magic, it's horrible, get away from it, it's something like otherworldly or something, there's something that you shouldn't be messed with, and then
yes.
He kind of goes throughout this entire game, and he does all these dark things, but it still doesn't stop Link or anything, and
he recommends these things.
Yeah, he even goes to the Palace of Twilight and even stops him. Like,
yes.
Eventually, like, sometime down the road. And then finally, after you defeat the Palace of Twilight or something, there's this other guy who you haven't been knowing about at all, and he's been doing a lot more subtler, that's a nice rhyme.
Subtler other things. Subtler, other. That's cool.
So, subtler other things. And it's kind of funny because he's still been just as much of a threat throughout the game, just simply because we didn't know he was there.
Right.
He's been kind of keeping himself just kind of behind the scenes like the entire time, but yeah, he ended up being the final boss because he was more of a threat, but we didn't see any of that threat. We've been focused on Zant, who's been over here just being like a little kid, just like jumping up and down and like throwing cake everywhere and saying, hey, look at me.
He would work behind Zant, and I think, like you brought up a good point, Zant would recommend that kind of magic, whereas you almost think Ganondorf embraced it. Like, he would use that to his advantage. The flaws and the magic of... Because think about it, he's totally using, like, all the things that they goofed up on as a means to escape from the Sacred Realm, from his seal. He's like, I will take these people's this race's flaws, and use it so I can once again come back on top.
Yeah, I'm like trying to think of another movie or another reference or something where that's actually worked very well. Is that somebody
It's funny because when you think about it, it kind of hasn't. And it really makes me appreciate Twilight Princess as a whole more, because you have these villains that are so alike yet so different. And from a first impressions, like even I was like, this is weird, I don't get it. But looking back at it, it's almost like I didn't see the bigger picture. And now that I'm starting to see it, it's really brilliant. It's something that I don't think a lot of people can comprehend or understand. It's fascinating, really.
It is. It's a lot of things to actually think about. Like
it's almost like all the bashings on like just being something weird and stupid or bad writing, maybe it was just something that our minds weren't open to. And once we opened up and accepted what it is, it's actually something much deeper and bigger than we ever thought it could be. Like, here's two villains that, in a sense, are after the same goal, but are going in two complete different directions on how to obtain it. Resulting in, honestly, a very unforgettable experience. Whether you like Zant's breakdown or not, you're not going to forget it.
It kind of reminds me...
It will leave an impression.
It kind of reminds me, though, from Oracle of Seasons and Ages, is that there's been kind of a similar thing that's been happening with Twinrova. I actually referenced it in my top 10 personal Zelda bosses, is that she's been running the show throughout the entire 2 games, and then when you go up to fight her, like in a last desperate attempt, she sacrifices herself to resurrect Ganon when it was supposed to be Zelda, but what that Ganon ends up being is actually a really stupid person.
Yeah, a mindless monster because it doesn't have the blood of Hylia.
Yeah, what's interesting, though, is that they've been working out this plan throughout the entire game, like 16 dungeons and all of the things, and then all of a sudden they just say, hey, you know what? Let's just sacrifice ourselves. It's just as good. And then you just see the end result of that, and then it's like, And then it's kind of interesting, though, too, because as the final boss, it's supposed to be, like, really hard, and it kind of is, but
I think it is.
yeah, especially with this Kamehameha blast.
It ain't easy. I'll say that. It's
But-
certainly not something to laugh at. I wouldn't say it's the hardest, but I certainly wouldn't call it an easy one.
Yeah, it is though interesting though too. I mean, he could have, like, even if he like killed Link or like went out into the world or something, it makes you wonder if he's actually capable of the task. If she was just so focused on killing Link at the moment that she didn't think about the end result.
Yeah.
And it's kind of in that moment that I've been thinking that maybe Zant is kind of the same way, is that he's been putting up like all of this stuff, all of this planning, and all of these like, I don't know, these little things he's been doing.
Yeah, but
And then
when
in
his
the end,
beliefs
it
crash
doesn't-
down upon him, he just backs into a corner and just spazzes.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I think we might have to wrap it up.
That's fine.